Good afternoon, everybody. I hope lunch was great. I missed it because I had to sprint up the road from my previous engagement. There was a road closure which kind of kiboshed the taxi. So one reason for being agile, I suppose. Now, you guys probably have never heard about me. I am a professional mountaineer. That is my job. I'm a professional mountain guide, and I climb and ski some of the big mountains in the world. And I've got about 35, 40-ish minutes to explain some of the crucial learning points from my career as a high altitude leader. I'm most well known for climbing this mountain here. This is Mount Everest. And in my little keynote today, I'm going to take you on a journey to the top of that mountain. But along the way, I want to try to distill to you what leadership and key critical decision making looks like to me and why it looks like that. Now, I am an unfamiliar face, unfamiliar voice, as Sarah said. So a very quick introduction. I was born in London. In fact, I was born in Slough. And last time I looked in Slough, there were no mountains. My career has been built upon really nothing other than hard work and diligence, which I think is a very crucial thing. One of those things which often is forgotten about these days. We expect often a meteoric rise to various positions. But that simply doesn't work in the mountains. You have to do hard work and diligence gets you there. And I am now considered one of the premier high altitude guides in the world, which, seeing that I grew up next to the Mars bar factory in Slough, I actually think is quite a worthy achievement. But we are talking about the mountains today and leadership. And for me, leadership boils down to very simply a few things. It's a relationship building process and it's a cultural thing. If you can build those into the team, I build relationships with my clients. I don't climb Everest for giggles. I professionally lead people to the top of that mountain. I always have done, be it unknowns that you'll never hear of, or even people like Sir Ranulph Fiennes, the world's greatest living explorer, who employed my services over a 5-6 year period with the express idea of trying to get him to the top of the mountain. And what I do, I try to build those relationships. And then with the cultural side of things, I bring in people from other religions, other countries, my Sherpa team. They've got a completely different way of thinking. I've got to bring it all together and somehow mold it into a functionable, high-performing team. Now, one of the very obvious things about that is a clear vision. And in mountaineering, we often think, well, what is the goal of mountaineering? Well, very simply, it's getting to the top of the mountain. It is an obvious one. There can be no clearer objective in anything we do. But is it? Because for me, it's not. An objective of mountaineering is to come home. First and foremost, come home safe and sound with 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a nose. You don't lose those bits to frostbite. Come home as friends, having had a really good time. And thirdly, and it is quite a distant third, is to gain the top of the mountain. Now, if the team don't understand what the vision and goal is, it's very hard to guide or to steer those individuals to their end goal. If one of my clients is so focused on climbing the mountain and nothing else, it's almost impossible for myself or the other members of the team to make the right decisions at the right time. So it's super important to have that clear vision. I instill into my clients, success represents the journey, not the destination. And once they understand that, once I can build that into the relationship, then my job as a high altitude leader becomes so much simpler. And the team is very diverse. My backroom team, for instance, are these guys, the Sherpas, the backbone of the Himalayas. This is Dorji Gelgin, my high-altitude climbing Sirdar, my right-hand man. And the guy in the background, who's always in the background, is Kami. He's my logisticals guy. I've worked with this team for nearly 12 years. They're one of the best out there. I spent a long time securing their services. Dorji last year said he didn't want to return to Everest. He had had enough of his friends dying on the mountain, the earthquake, the avalanche, which killed a number of his friends in 2014. I had to somehow coax him back into the team. He is, I think, indispensable. And the way I coaxed him back was not throwing money at the situation, because that's just rude. And it's asking him to do something he's uncomfortable with, something which ultimately could kill him. So to give him money is nothing short of blood money. Now, the reason I got Dorji back into the fold is because of the years of working with him, the building the trust. I've climbed with Dorji. I've got 8 or 9 summits of Everest. We stood shoulder to shoulder. I've laughed with him. I've cried with him. I've sweated with him. I carried huge loads up and down the mountain. I've celebrated with him, building that culture within the team so that when I do bring my clients into Everest Base Camp and to the Himalayas, there's already a very good understanding about what the culture looks like. It's a winning culture. It's one of confidence and it's one of experience. Now, Mount Everest is a huge project. It takes often 6 or 7 weeks, unless you decide that you want to employ my services, in which case I have a slightly different outlook on how you approach the mountain, a slightly slicker, more streamlined version. This year, I climbed Mount Everest with a VC company owner whose actually offices are just up the road from here. And we did a turnaround in 4 weeks, 2 days, the quickest ever commercial Himalayan Everest expedition. And it's not through cutting corners, it's through effective leadership. It's knowing when to call the shots, why to call the shots, and then how to execute it. As I say, it's a huge project. This is what Everest Base Camp looks like. It's nothing more than a rubble of stones on a moving glacier. I was putting this little presentation together, did some quick sums. I spent 3 years of my life in that tent, that dome tent. I don't know if that's something to boast about or something that's a little bit sad, but it all happens from that one tent, and you import everything you need there. Now, the first obstacle of many on Mount Everest is that thing behind you. Everything we do in life is full of obstacles. And what we can do as climbers or as individuals, we can run away from the challenge, or we can embrace the challenge. By the time I get to Everest, my clients know exactly what the potential pitfalls are. And one of the bigger ones is this. And we somehow have to find a very convoluted way through it. It's incredibly dangerous. I mean, we've come up it a couple of times now, and it always instills a huge amount of respect for me. It talks to you. It lets you know what it's going to do to a certain extent, and it can implode underneath you. It can drop on you from above, or, you know, God forbid, you can fall into its inner depths, you know, never to be seen again. It's, how do you describe the icefall? It's undescribable in a way. It's unique. There's nothing like it in the Alps. I've not experienced anything like it in the Himalayas, or not on this scale. It's unique to Everest. Ooh, a new triple set of ladders. One of the biggest ones we've come across. Oh, I don't like the ladders. Never have liked the ladders. Hope it's a steady one. I can't find the bloody. Ooh dear. Oh, that looks safe, doesn't it? Oh my word, it's enormous. At least the ladder's fairly well positioned. Oh, nasty, nasty. Oh my word. Didn't like that at all. You know, we don't just step out the door and take risks willy-nilly. Everything we do is calculated. And despite that this is what, my 9th straight year here, so I must have crossed these ladders dozens and dozens of times, I still don't like them. I still don't feel comfortable with them. You get on them and you're holding these little bits of rope, and your feet and your crampon feet are tinking across the rungs, and you look down and some of these things are just bottomless, absolutely bottomless. And oof, for me, I've never felt comfortable with them in all the time I've been here. Nothing you can do to take away the danger. It is a dangerous thing. But statistically, it's not as dangerous as some of the other parts of Everest. And at the very top is very, very exposed to a Sirac fall. And what I mean by that is like these hanging ice cliffs, which can break off under their own weight almost at any time. Now the big crevasse, the biggest danger is all this stuff above me. Really scary, really, really scary. It's one of those things that drives us forwards, I think, as human beings. We kind of like that little buzz of adrenaline that comes with risk. I think what many people don't realise, risk is actually a binary function. It's 1 or 0. It happens or it doesn't happen. The effects, be it the Siracs, the hanging ice cliffs above us, it would either fall off or it won't fall off. There's no in-between ground. And I think for me, as a mountain guide and as I say, an Everest leader, it's about how we manage that risk. We're playing with Mother Nature here. I mean, I look all around me and there's these huge towering mountains that we want to climb. And each holds their own hidden dangers, be it icefall collapse, be it exhaustion of the climbers, be it falling off, avalanches. There's a whole host of things here which makes the mountains dangerous. Hidden dangers. As climbers, we call them objective dangers. And I always try to instill in people, all we can do is control the controllables. And if we do that well as a team, not simply have an understanding of them, but actually control the controllables, then everything else on the periphery we have to deal with as and when they occur. I can't control when a Sirac's going to drop off. I can't control if there's going to be an implosion in the icefall. What I do with my clients and my team is instill to them the reasons why we do it. So we may all be at Everest Base Camp, sat around the mess tent, and we are thinking about going through the icefall the following morning. It involves a 4 o'clock start. You leave, you go through early in the morning to try to get out the icefall, not because the sun affects the snow, but because it actually gets too hot to climb or move in the icefall. And what we do around the table that night, we make sure that everybody knows exactly why we are doing things. It's much easier to justify a decision if everybody has the understanding of why. Why are we doing this? The icefall is an incredibly dangerous place, and it puts many people off Everest, and rightly so. There's horror stories everywhere. But that's all part of the relationship building. It's my job to instill into my clients that actually it's not the horror show that they think it is. That with the right people behind them and the right professional guide, we quite happily navigate through that. I've been through the icefall more times than I care to remember without a single hiccup, touch wood, thus far. Now, as we get higher on the mountain, things start to change. And I always talk about decision-making in the mountains needs to be binary. I spoke about it a little bit on the video. Risk being a binary function, 1 or 0. The icefall falls off or it doesn't fall off. As simple as that. And I kind of compressed that a little bit into something I call binary thinking. And that's very clear, pretty obvious thinking. When we get above 7,500 meters above sea level, the amount of oxygen or perceived oxygen in the atmosphere, the air density, it falls so low that human life cannot be sustained for any prolonged period of time. Climbers, being simple folk, we call it the death zone. Because simply put, our bodies slowly start to break down and die. When we get into that situation, decision making becomes very critical. Binary thinking. I'm making decisions on the moment. I don't let any third-party influences come in to cloud my judgment. This photograph was taken high on one of Everest's neighboring peaks, Mount Nuptse, 7,900 odd meters. I think it's the 19th highest mountain in the world. And I found myself late in the afternoon on these very unstable snow slopes. And for the first time ever in my climbing career, I found myself having a conflict of interest. I've got 2 young children at home, And I felt very, very exposed on these slopes. In fact, I wasn't even roped up. I'll go into that perhaps some other time. But I was there on my own, thousands of meters above the ground. And all of a sudden, on my right shoulder popped my daughter. And I could hear a voice in my ear saying, "Daddy, Daddy, why are you doing this?" That's an emotional decision. That's an emotional clouding of your judgment. My decisions in the mountains have to be one thing: logical. The only thing I can assimilate is real-time information. What are the conditions? How are my clients? What is the oxygen flow? How does the weather look? How strong are my Sherpa team right now? Not how strong are they when I first signed them up, or how strong are they next year. How strong are they right now? Real-time information. And I'm constantly assimilating that all the time. My decision-making is constant, right throughout the day, from leaving base camp to getting to the top and back down. It's not these sudden moments of inspiration. It's a constant process of decision-making. That day high on Nuptse, I had a very deep psychological battle with myself to erase that thought of my daughter asking me what on earth I thought I was doing. That emotional decision-making had no place on me that day. I had to block it out and then make my decision logically. And the logical decision was to gain the summit and then, in conjunction with my friend Alex, very rapidly make our way back down, because Alex was feeling less than well that day. Now, Mount Everest, I believe, is a beautiful mountain, and a little wake-up call. I wasn't going to do this, but let's have a little quiz. I love this. Why does anybody know what rock Everest is made out of? What rock type? Granite? Well, there's a little bit of granite running through it. You see the pale rock at the bottom? That's essentially granite at the bottom. So it's not granite. We'll be here all day. I've only got 35 minutes or so. It's limestone. It's limestone. And where does limestone start its life? Bottom of the seabed. And now where is it? Wow, you guys aren't, you're not impressed by that, are you? I love that fact. I think that fact's sensational. Oh, come on, work with me here. I think that's amazing. The very top of the world started its anyway, it holds no relevance to my talk. I thought you might like that fact on a Tuesday afternoon, clearly not. Okay, so for many people, this will be their focus. My clients, they come to me, they want to climb Everest, and they're focusing on that tippy top of the mountain. We've already seen what it takes to get through the icefall. You get to the bottom of essentially this picture, that's Camp 2. It's a staging post. From Camp 2 onwards, the stakes start to ramp up. We end up climbing up the Lhotse face, this huge sweep of ice behind me. And it's so large, in fact, that we can't climb it in a single go. We put a camp about halfway up. Now, for me, that second day on the Lhotse face represents the low point in the whole project. For me, personally, it's a nothing day. You leave the Camp 3 about 6 o'clock in the morning, you put on a big down suit, you have your breathing apparatus on for the very first time. I'm trying to instill into the clients a sense of, go get them. Let's get out there. Let's get up to the South Col, which is the next camp. South Col is our launch spot. But for me, this day, it's one of those days, it's a nothing day. We're not gunning for the summit, yet we are in the death zone. And everything is now binary thinking. It's getting quite critical. And it's very hard sometimes to motivate people. As soon as the sun comes up, you start to heat up. And what people don't realize on Everest, when it's not freezing cold, is oppressively hot. It can reach 30-odd degrees on this slope, and you've got to have a big down suit on. Because when you started in the morning, it was minus 20, minus 25. The temperature swings are horrendous. And what I need to do is motivate not just the paying client, but the Sherpa team. The Sherpas don't like this either. And you've got to bolster them up. Now, I'm lucky with my amazing Sherpa team, because when I come around the corner, just here, so you come around the corner into Camp 4, and the guys always play this trick. The first Sherpa there, he doesn't start putting up tents. No. He goes around and finds this dead bird that lies there. It's called a lammergeier. It's a big carrion bird, and it's frozen, so it doesn't decay. He picks it up, drops his rucksack, and hides behind a rock, which is just out of view. And you come around the corner with your paying clients, and he will jump out from behind the rock with a bird on his head and start running around going, "Me, Lama guy!" The clients, including Ranulph Fiennes, the great Ranulph Fiennes, his eyes were out. He didn't quite know what was going on. We're 8,000 meters above sea level, and the Sherpas are essentially playing a practical joke. Meanwhile, the other Sherpas, they're laughing, "Oh, dodgy Lama guy again." They love it. The reason why I'm telling you this story is, I suppose the reason why I'm telling you this story is, at 8,000 meters, you would think that everybody would be so far out of their comfort zone that they lose a sense of fun. Well, they don't. If you push somebody constantly enough, that constant flex, if you constantly challenge somebody, then environments such as the South Pole no longer represent an alien environment. The Sherpas, they're very much at one at 8,000 meters, and they can operate as efficiently there, not physically, but mentally, as they can back down at base camp. Meanwhile, clients, well, they're way out of their comfort zone. Ranulph Fiennes, for instance, I hate to keep picking him out, but you've probably heard of him. Ranulph Fiennes, for instance, back in 2009, when we were leaving to go for the summit, he had to ask me to tie his bootlaces because his ability of rational thought and his dexterity completely disappeared. Every decision was therefore in my hands, from tying his bootlaces to putting his crampons on, and in actual fact, in 2008, to tell him to turn around. Now, people have often said to me, well, how do you get somebody like Ranulph Fiennes to turn around, one of the most determined men on the planet? The turnaround was roughly halfway up to the South Summit. The pinnacle spike there is the South Summit, and we were 2/3 of the way up to there, making very good time, very good progress to the summit. The way I often turn people around on Everest is not how you think it may be. It's not a dictator, you will turn around, you're going too slow, or whatever it may be. If the relationship building process has gone the way it should do, you're constantly front-loading. Ranulph Fiennes actually made his own decision at 8,500 odd meters. I knew that that day it perhaps wasn't going to work. Now, we left the South Pole. You could tell there was a chink in Rand's armor. I knew there was a chink because of the amount of time I spent with him. That relationship I had with Rand over 5 years. The Sherpas sensed it as well. It's far easier to get a client to say, actually, I'm not comfortable. Let them make their own decision, and I'm there to back it up. Not always like that, but in the case of Rand, that's exactly how it is done, just drip-fed, so that a critical decision is almost taken out of my hands, even though I know that if push came to shove, I will have the ability to turn him around and say no. And saying no is a very powerful thing in the mountains. People's dreams and aspirations hang on that. Rand had been thinking about climbing Everest. In fact, that was his second attempt when I turned him around. He'd been planning it for the last six years almost. But he understood the reasons why, because of the culture. You get the culture right, then those really hard decisions become that much easier. And what is it like? Well, people may tell you that climbing Everest is a mere walk. Well, that doesn't look like a walk to me. That's the summit ridge of Everest. The chips are now so down that even the slightest of errors compounds very quickly. And if we just think about it for a minute, there is no rescue at 8,000 meters. You can't call in a helicopter to come and whisk you off the mountainside because helicopters can't effectively fly that high. Where else in the planet is there no rescue? Because you could be on the polar ice caps and you can get a twin otter in. Maybe in the deepest, darkest cave, there's no rescue. But that's about it. You are very much out on a limb. You may also hear about crowds on Everest. Well, crowds on Everest comes down to one thing: poor management and bad decision making. One thing I always try to it's so important to make your own decisions. This photograph was taken 3 or 4 days after a picture was released on Everest of a huge queue of people. A huge queue of people where 4 individuals died that day because they spent over 3 hours waiting at the Hillary step, which is pretty much in the center of the picture. And the reason why people rushed is because they didn't have the patience. They were waiting for that weather window, which finally came, and all the teams upsticked and left, and thought that if they all climbed together, there'll be safety in numbers. But there never is safety in numbers. Make your own decisions. Don't look around you and let others influence you. Logical decisions. Look at what's in front of you. Look at the real-time information and base your decisions upon your experience and what you are seeing at the time. That's all you can do. That's all you can do in the mountains. Now, getting to the top of the mountain is, it really does take your breath away. Now, we've talked about it a little bit already. Deadlines. Deadlines in the big mountains are absolutely critical, and it's a bugbear of mine. We have a 1 o'clock turnaround on Everest, came into being after the 96 disaster. What people don't always realize, we leave about 10 o'clock at night, climb right through the night, looking to summit about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, giving enough daylight, giving enough time, and hopefully enough oxygen reserves to get back down the mountain. The mistakes always generally occur on the way down. People lose focus, they make mistakes. 1 o'clock deadline. It's a deadline. In my industry, it's the reason why it's called deadline. If you get it wrong, somebody dies, pretty simply put. Now, I work more and more in the corporate world, and it seems to me that a deadline is one of these quite wishy-washy things that exists. They put a deadline in place. Oh, I'll just extend it a little bit. No, ladies and gentlemen, a deadline is there for a reason. People rely on deadlines, and certainly in the mountains, you don't miss a deadline. It's called a deadline because people die in the death zone if you miss them. 1 o'clock turnaround time. And again, that's instilled in the team. Everybody knows what it is. Everybody knows when it's going to occur. Now, once you get to the top of the mountain, 8,850 meters above sea level, let's just put it very quickly into context, that's where airliners fly. That's how high it is. Once you get there, you're only halfway there. You've got to get back down. The famous American mountaineer, a good friend of mine, Ed Viestas, once famously said, getting to the top is optional, but getting back down is mandatory. And that's where the mistakes start to creep in. People are tired. They fulfilled their ambition and dream. They take their eye off the ball. Complacency has no place in mountaineering. Complacency has no place in business. Soon as it starts to creep in, people start making mistakes. You become mediocre in what you're doing. And even the term mediocre, it doesn't sit well with me. You've got to be sharp all the time. Challenge yourselves constantly. I showed you the picture of the summit ridge. There is no margin for error. Complacency is a killer at 8,000 meters. It has no place in the team. And my team all know that. But then you do finally get to the top, and I've just got a little teaser of what it's like. So we're looking due west here to Shushapangma and Choyoya. Landing to Chinese Tibet. If you know your Everest history, the North Ridge, didn't they in 1924 actually write a completely different history? Disappearance of Mallory and Irving. Far distance from the Indian border is Kenton, climbed by the Brits in 55. Mount Makalu, considered a French mountain, very nationalistic, climbing the 8,000 meter peak in the 50s. The 50s rather. That's Mount Nuptse in the background there. That's where I had the little dilemma with the vision of my daughter on my shoulder. And somebody always asks, how big is the summit of Everest? Well, the real summit rather small. That's the summit. That's people's ambition and dreams are that little mound of snow. Now, just before I leave you this afternoon, I just want to talk about one last thing. I've got a really good record in the mountains, partly because I really do vet my clients before we even step foot on the mountain. I have a hit rate of 84%. That's the summit success rate with my clients. That's way above anybody else on the planet. That comes from careful pre-expedition vetting of that individual. Do they have the same morals and values that I do? Everything else I can work with, their technical skill and their physical attributes, I can work with that. Do they have the same vision that I do? That's really important. And the other thing is a system that I instilled to my Sherpas a couple of years ago. We call it Clean 2. And Clean 2 is essentially the handing over of each and every camp. You've got base camp, camp 1, 2, 3, 4, with the last one being up in that cold between the two mountains. Clean 2. You hand that over in the manner that you would expect to receive it yourself. Tick all the boxes, dot all the I's, cross all the T's. It is in a perfect position to hand over. And if you do all that, clean to 1, 2, 3, 4, you are then clean to summit. And if you're clean to summit, summit execution should be, has to be seamless. Absolutely seamless. And every single time I've been up there, we've had seamless execution. Every time. It's the only way to operate. Now, I started with a picture just like this, and very, very briefly, if you can just see with eagle eyes, you can see the little yellow dots of base camp down the bottom. Gives you an idea of the size and magnitude of the project. That's base camp. I've talked a lot this afternoon. It is my passion, Everest. I could talk to you about decision-making and leadership on the mountain forever. But I'm going to leave you with a couple of very quick takeaways. I don't always do this, but I've talked about such a wide, broad spectrum of things. Ability to adapt to the changing environment. We can't control the mountains, and we certainly can't control the weather. You have to be agile with it. The importance of setting clear goals. What is the goal? Is it getting to the top of the mountain? Well, we discussed that earlier. No, it's not. Taking personal responsibility. We only really touched upon this a little bit, but make your own decisions. Don't let other people make them for them. Understanding how others work. I don't understand my Sherpa team's religion and cultures that well. I have to be tolerant and understanding of that. Otherwise, they won't work effectively for me. The importance of effective teamwork. I love to stand here and say, I've climbed Everest 12 times. I haven't. My team has climbed 12 times. I just happen to be part of that team. Clear communication. On Mount Everest, it means absolutely everything. And then finally, we spoke about it very briefly, Clean 2, seamless execution. It has to be seamless on 8,000 meters or people die. 35 minutes I was given, and I do apologize, that's 37 minutes. You can follow me on social media, as is your wont, on, I don't know why it's so low there, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, etc. I do hope that you take one or two things away from that this afternoon. Thank you very much.